So I want to welcome everybody on behalf of the Ventura County Interfaith community. We are glad you are here. I believe, and I'm going to say this, I've said it before, but I'm going to repeat it, that COVID has brought us, 2020 has brought us some interesting times. And often we look at the negativity, and it was a negativity that we were not able to do the Feast of Faith. But it's also brought some huge positives. And one of those positives is that
to plug it in.
I think you may want to mute all.
Yes.
Go ahead, Al. Terry, you muted yourself. Yeah.
Okay, I will try this again. One of the positives that we have had from the COVID virus and being home is that we've learned to do things differently, and it's provided us this opportunity to learn more about each other and our different faiths. And tonight we're going to do a special one on the holidays and traditions for 4 different faiths. So that's why I'm excited that we are here to do this. And I also want to remind everybody, hang on a second, I need the best way to find out about our next forum, and I didn't bring the flyer up, but the best way to stay informed about everything that Ventura County Interfaith Community is doing is to go onto our website and look at what is there. And I'm going to actually pull it up to kind of give you a idea of how to do that, because we keep talking about it, but we're not doing it. And I had it pulled up. You know how you pull things up and then they disappear? So all windows. Well, bad me. I lost it, honey. Hang on a minute.
You can just do it and then show it at the end, and people can jot it down or put it in chat.
I will. I was going to show them how to go about the website, because sometimes it's confusing for people and how they see that. And I had it pulled up here and it seems to have gone all away from all of the things I was doing. So never mind. So go to vcic.info and you'll see some information about Ventura County Interfaith Community, and it will say, if you're interested, subscribe here. And on the side of the website, it will show the different videos of the different forums we've been having, and you can connect on those and go to the videos.
Carrie,
Yes.
Lori, do you want me to share my screen? I think I've got the website up. Are you going to see like really personal stuff I never wanted you to?
No, that's okay, Lori. Thank
Okay.
you, though. I appreciate it. And it's good that you're here. I'm glad you're here. Actually, let me see if I can do it now. I'm spending too much time on this. My apologies. So on that point, we'll move on to just remind you that we are recording this session so that you can go back to the website and find it, or you can invite people to see it and see how strange we are or how good we are or something they want to learn. It is worth doing because we have done a lot of good things and we learn a lot of good things. And at the end, there will be a question and answer session, and those questions may be submitted via the chat facility that is at the bottom of your screen or somewhere on your screen. It can be accessed by hovering over your cursor at the bottom and clicking on the icon, and I would ask you to address your questions to me. I sit and filter them to try and make sure I don't leave questions out, but I try to make them work together so we stay on topic. The other thing is we'd like you to stay muted unless somebody is speaking, because it keeps the sound down. So Mike, am I missing anything on that because you're an expert at this?
Nope. I think we're good.
Okay, so I would like to introduce Tim McDonald as the moderator. He's the guy with all the fancy Christmas trimming behind him on the screen. Tim McDonald is retired as a captain of the Los Angeles Fire Department after 32 years of service. When not putting out fires, he served as head of international ministry at the local church level. He and his wife, Maria, led short-term outreaches to Mexico and Indonesia. And more recently, he served as the administrative assistant at the consultant for Christian Muslim relations for Vineyard USA. He and his wife now enjoy an excellent relationship with their local Islamic center and many of its members. Tim is currently the Southern California Regional Director for Peace Catalyst International, or PCI. And PCI is an international organization that encourages peace and understanding between Muslims and Christians. And on saying that, I would say that would be one of the things you could be looking for through Ventura County Interfaith Community is when we do things with our Muslim friends, like Love Your Neighbor or friend-to-friend things that we are planning to do in the future. So keep your eyes open for those things. We're always looking for things to help us learn about each other. So Tim, on that note, please take it away.
Oh, thanks, Terry. And thank you all for joining the Ventura County Interfaith Community for a look at how various faiths celebrate the holy days. This evening, we're going to look at the Baha'i Faith, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and see how they celebrate these special times. Well, let's start with Christianity, because with the Christmas season upon us, we're seeing signs of the season everywhere we look, from the Christmas tree lots to houses decked out with lights, snowmen, reindeer, all these decorations behind me. Well, you get the picture. So, but where did these traditions come from? You might be surprised, but right now we have to explain some of these traditions. We have our very own Keith Salvis here to explain. Keith was born in Warwick, Rhode Island, and spent his first few years of his education in Springfield, Massachusetts. There he experienced a revival of the Springfield plan from the 1940s, but with a new twist added. And if you don't know what that is, it would be worth your while to look it up. Children were given a taste of racism by using their eye color as a metaphor for race and religion. And the person who led the experiment, Rebecca Johnson, was Springfield's first Black public school principal. She left an indelible impression upon Keith's spirit, which has grown into a passion for equality for all. Keith is proud to be a member of the VCIC and shares in the vision of a world free of racism and religious prejudice. So Keith, take over.
Tim, thank you very much for that introduction. And I forgot to mention in my introduction that I am a born-again Christian and I'm a non-denominational Christian. And I fall into a small subset of those Christians who don't fully embrace the teachings of Paul. Having said that, when we were discussing this meeting, I kind of opened up my mouth and said, hey, Christmas has got a phenomenal history, not knowing I was volunteering myself for this talk. Turned out that the history of Christmas was quite a deep dive. I'm not sure of all of my facts. Please be kind to me if I've got something wrong, but you may also recognize certain things that we have discussed in prior meetings. So having said that, let me get started. And I am going to share this screen now. So, Christmas is an annual festival commemorating the birth of Jesus of Nazareth and is observed by billions of people around the world. Trinitarian and non-Trinitarian Christians celebrate the religious aspects of the Christ child's entrance into the world, while many non-Christians celebrate the cultural aspects of Christmas that have developed in the 2,000 years since, but without necessarily recognizing Jesus's religious significance. And my screen did not change. Okay, there we go. Popular modern customs of the holiday practiced by both religious and non-religious people include gift giving, Christmas music and caroling, exchanging cards, Christmas decorations, including Christmas trees and lights, wreaths, mistletoe, and holly. In addition, several closely related and often interchangeable figures known as Santa Claus, Father Christmas, and Saint Nicholas are associated with bringing gifts to children during the Christmas season. Boy, that's a long ways away from the birth of Jesus. See, the thing is, to Christians, Jesus is often lost in the modern day celebration. So first we need to explore the question, who is or what was Jesus? The Tanakh, often referred to by Christians as the Old Testament, contained prophecies of a Messiah or anointed one. Possibly the most closely related to Christianity is Ha-Messiah, literally the anointed one. This is to be a human leader and a direct descendant of David. He's thought to accomplish predetermined things in only one future arrival, including the unification of the tribes of Israel, the gathering of all Jews to Eretz Israel, the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, the ushering in of the messianic age of global universal peace, and the annunciation of the world to come. The concept of the Messiah, though, as a single individual, isn't found in the Old Testament. It's strictly a post-biblical tradition. It's in this post-biblical tradition that Christians bring Jesus to the forefront. Christians concur that this Messiah is a descendant of King David, and many, but not all Christians hold him up as the physical incarnation of God himself. However, Christians don't concur that he's to make only one appearance. He's to make two. In the first appearance, he atones completely for Adam's original sin and ends the Jewish sacrificial system of the law, and in doing so ushers in the era of grace. He does this at the end of his life by willingly dying on a crucifix. Poetically speaking, God becomes a human sacrifice to God for the sake of his creations. It's in his second coming to the Christians, which hasn't happened yet, that he accomplishes these remaining prophecies. While in the second coming, he appears as he left as an adult human form, it's in his first coming, some 2,000 years ago, that he's born into this world of a woman taking on a human form. And it's in his birth into this world that forms the basis for the Christmas celebration. What's most interesting here is that it's his death and resurrection that forms the basis of the Christian religion. His birth, though chronicled in the New Testament, wasn't celebrated by the earliest Christians, possibly because at that time, celebrating individual birthdays was considered a pagan practice. So how did the birth of Jesus 2,000 years ago become one of humanity's essential holidays today? To answer that question, let's look first at the New Testament narrative concerning the birth of Jesus. In the traditional Christian narrative, an angel approached a young virgin, Hebrew virgin by the name of Mary, to tell her she'd give birth to the long prophesied Messiah. She became pregnant by God's Holy Spirit on the spot, but there was a complication. Mary was already betrothed to Joseph, technically married, and he found out that she was pregnant. Not knowing that this was God's doing, or just not believing Mary's explanation, Joseph sought to put Mary away secretly. That meant that he wanted to divorce her and at the same time avoid the public humiliation that he had to endure should Mary's indiscretion become known. It also implies that he consulted with a religious official who was knowledgeable on the law. His choices were few, and they weren't good. If Joseph could prove Mary wasn't a virgin when they'd wed, he could have had the marriage annulled. That still wouldn't have brought shame to Mary's family and humiliation to Joseph's family. It still would have. But Mary was pregnant. That option was out. Joseph's other option would have been to press for adultery. This would have necessitated for the search for an adulterer, so the two could be brought outside the city walls and publicly stoned to death together. Egypt would not have been far enough away from the shame all the parties would have endured, and Christianity would have died in the womb. An interesting point to be made here is the Talmud was still under development. More than that, Joseph's need to get solid counsel may have coincided with the highest point of a rivalry between two rabbinical colleges. The question here being, did Joseph receive an opinion from a student of the more permissive Hillel, who taught that one could divorce his wife for the simple reason of just burning dinner, or from an adherent of the stricter Shammai, who taught that one could only divorce for reason of adultery? The difference being a simple certificate of divorce, or, as already mentioned, being stoned to death. The debate never entered into the story because Joseph never got a chance to decide what opinion to follow. As he slept on the matter, and I suppose the miracle here is that he could sleep at all, he was advised in a dream not to put Mary away, but to take her as his wife because the child was in fact conceived by the Holy Spirit and was truly the long-awaited Messiah. Well, that drama was over, but just like in any reality TV show, the drama that concludes at the end of one episode dovetails into the drama of the next. In an arrangement between Herod and Caesar, little bit of backstory, Israel was still a free nation. Herod could remain king so long as he allowed Roman peacekeeping forces on the ground and didn't resist Roman taxation. And that taxation enters into the story of Jesus's birth at this point. As a part of what may have been a long-range feasibility study for the complete takeover of Israel, which did happen 12 years later, Caesar ordered a census of the inhabitants of Israel. Every man was ordered to return to his town of birth, along with his family, to be counted and taxed. Joseph, with a very pregnant Mary, made the trip to Bethlehem. Now, we can assume that Joseph made the trip very slowly so as not to cause Mary to give birth on the road. That assumption is backed up by the gospel record that states that when they arrived, all the hotels were full. They were the last to get there. Everyone else arrived ahead. So Joseph and Mary were given permission to sleep in a stable, and there Jesus, the Savior of all mankind, was born, and his swaddled infant body was laid to rest in a feed trough. A humble beginning for the King of Kings, and it set the tone for this classic rags to resurrection story. Now we move to the nativity, or the birth of Jesus. The Gospel of Luke records the actual nativity. Joseph and Mary lodge in a stable, and there Jesus is born. Luke also records that angels appeared to shepherds as they slept in the fields to tell them that their Savior is born and to go take a look. This passage forms a major part of the Christmas story, and it's seen in nativity displays and heard in many Christmas songs today. Now, Christianity, I want to take a moment here to say that Christianity isn't the only religion that addresses the birth of Jesus, but it's the only one that brings us the Christmas story. The Quran gives an expanded version of Jesus's birth, and academics have noted that the account is actually in Surah 19, is particularly close to the Gospel of Luke. The Quran affirms that Mary was a literal virgin when Jesus was conceived. The angel Gabriel appeared to her in the form of a man and stated that she is honored over all women of all nations. He, Gabriel, has brought her glad tidings of a holy son. And we hear that a lot in a lot of Christmas stories today, those exact phrases. God breathed through the angel and Mary conceived. In the Quran, however, Mary is single. She's been pledged to God by her mother and was being raised in the temple. in Bethlehem under the care of the prophet and priest Zechariah. This is the same Zechariah in the New Testament in the Bible who became the father of John the Baptist, Jesus's cousin. Mary's birth pangs in the Quran drove her to a palm tree. After giving birth, Mary carries the baby back to the temple. She is asked by the temple elders about the child. She's been commanded by Gabriel to a vow of silence, so she pointed to the newborn infant who's only a few hours old and spoke for himself and proclaimed that he is God's servant. You know, the Quran concur with the Catholics that Mary was free of original sin, though it does say that she and Mary were protected from Satan's touch. The Quran does concur with the Catholics that Mary is free from original sin. I've got myself confused in my own notes, though it does say that she and Mary were protected from Satan's touch. But it doesn't concur with Christians in general that Jesus is God himself. But it does agree that Jesus will have a second coming. So I wanted to point out here that Quran shows some similarities in the Christian nativity story. And I noticed that some of those things in the Quran do enter into our modern celebration of Christmas today. Now, also, the Book of Mormon prophesied much about the coming of Jesus, but gives a brief version of his birth. Third Nephi records that the day of his birth, there were 2 days of continuous daylight. The sun set on the first day, but it remained as light as the day all night long. It wasn't until the sun set on the second day that nightfall returned. That doesn't enter into the mainstream modern Christian celebration. I would note here is that neither the Quran nor Book of Mormon appear to have entered into the modern Christian celebration, except for certain things in the Quran, but a passage in the Gospel according to Matthew, which occurs a year or more after Jesus's birth does. And I found this to be an interesting thing. In the Gospel of Matthew, it recounts the appearance of a new star thought to be a sign of the Messiah's birth. Magi, under the direction of King Herod, investigate. Although the number of magi isn't known, it's often counted as 3 because they bring 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They visit Jesus, Joseph, and Mary at their family dwelling when Jesus was somewhere between 1 and 2 years old. But this scene is often combined with Luke's account of the nativity in the stable and is often depicted that way in modern times. Now, there is an ancillary passage of the 3 fleeing to Egypt for a time to protect Jesus's life from Herod, who saw Jesus as a threat to his dynasty. This episode adds to the drama of Jesus's life, but it isn't a main theme concerning the celebration of his birth. So now we get to the celebration of Christmas throughout history, now that we've established who Jesus is according to different religions. So as stated, the importance of Jesus to Christianity throughout the ages has hinged mostly upon his death and resurrection. His birth wasn't a major factor for about 300 years. But as early as 200 AD in the Eastern Roman Empire, Jesus' entrance into this world was celebrated in connection with the Epiphany, or his baptism, on January 6th. It wasn't until 313 AD when Christianity was legalized in the Western Empire by Emperor Constantine in what is known as the Edict of Milan, that Christians were free to celebrate all aspects of their faith. But there aren't any records showing that Christmas was observed beginning in 313 AD. The Roman chronology of 354 AD does reveal that Christmas celebration 1 did take place in Rome in 336 AD on December 25th, and this might be the first record of Christmas being celebrated on December 25th. But Christmas wasn't an official holiday. In fact, It only ran for a short season, fueled by the Arian controversy. The Arian controversy was a series of Christian theological disputes that arose between Arius and Athanasius of Alexandria, Egypt. The most important of these controversies concerned the substantial relationship between God the Father and God the Son. These disagreements divided the church into two opposing theological factions for over 55 years. And from the time before the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD until after the First Council of Constantinople in 381 AD, when the controversy finally fell to the wayside, the Christian celebration went with it. It'd be another 500 years before Christmas reemerged as a major celebration. As a point of interest, Roman scholars during the time of the controversy did affix Christmas Day to December 25th because that coincided with the winter solstice. This symbolically represented the day when all days would get longer. During the years that followed the Arian controversy, Christmas was still celebrated amongst the peoples of both the Eastern and Western Holy Roman Empires, but they were still celebrated 12 days apart. That became a discrepancy. It became a problem for the economy. This was addressed in 567 AD. The Council of Tours proclaimed that the entire period should be considered as part of one celebration, thus creating what became known as the 12 Days of Christmas. However, this was more of an administrative effort to bring the two economies in line. It could also be considered the first attempt to commercialize Christmas. Still, Christmas wasn't an essential holiday. That changed in 800 AD when Charlemagne chose December 25th as the day of his coronation. In the next 200 or 300 years, more European kings followed suit. Christmas per se was now firmly established in Europe, but the traditions we know today were still in flux. However, as early as 900 AD, the Germans incorporated the practice of decorating trees as part of the celebration, the Tannenbaum. It caught on, although not everywhere at once. Other traditions would precede it that weren't universally accepted. By the 1600s, though, Christmas was firmly established in England, but it was celebrated with singing and carousing. That was to the ire of the Puritans, who thought Christmas to be a promotion of man's worst qualities. Well, the reality is it was, and there were riots in London over its celebration. Meanwhile, in the New World, the Plymouth Pilgrims, their Puritans in their own rights, put their loathing for the day into practice in 1620 when they spent the first Christmas day in the New World working, thus demonstrating their complete contempt for the day. Non-Puritans in New England deplored the loss of the holidays enjoyed by the laboring classes of England. Christmas observance was outlawed in Boston in 1659. There were even riots in Boston over its celebration in 1650. The ban by the Puritans was revoked in 1681 by English Governor Edmund Andros. However, it was not until the mid-19th century that celebrating Christmas became fashionable in the Boston region. As a historical note, Christmas was officially banned in Scotland until the Scottish Parliament lifted the ban in 1958.
Wow, Keith.
Back in America. The
So,
division
Keith,
over.
I'm gonna ask you to wrap it up so we can have time for other people.
You know what? I've got another 8 minutes, 6 minutes to go. All I can say is that George Washington didn't celebrate Christmas because it was a British thing, which is why he
Wow.
why he attacked. All right. So that's that. Let's see.
Oh, okay.
He attacked the Germans, the Monrovians, who in America celebrated Christmas, decorating Christmas trees. Let's see. Clement Moore created St. Nicholas, and he didn't like his own poem, even though it was published. He was a very erudite professor and tried to avoid it, even though it became very popular. He used a Dutch store owner as his model for St. Nicholas. I'm rushing through this stuff to do this. In Germany, on December 6th, they celebrate Krampus Day. Krampus is kind of an antithesis of St. Nicholas or Santa Claus. He comes around and punishes children for misbehaving. Sometimes in Eastern Europe, it's still celebrated today. People dressed up as Krampus and Santa Claus come together. And
Well,
then
you have finally, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, if you've ever heard of Krampus, it's Charles Dickens finally is the one who changed Christmas for all of us, inspired by stories written by Irving Washington, who wrote Rip Van Winkle. He took the Christmas holiday in England was still in flux. There were new things coming in. The Christmas tree was just becoming a modern tradition. So he wrote a story based upon some of his experiences. He had been to some of those schools for the street children in London. And so his A Christmas Carol, which is a much longer title, but we just know it as A Christmas Carol, was inspired by those experiences, and he changed it into the modern holiday that we know today with gifting and goodwill towards men. And that wasn't necessarily the celebration at that time. Let's see. One
more thing. I was going to say, why don't we leave it there? And, you know, all this good information here is something that we should revisit next year.
Okay.
And something you might write up and we can put on our website.
Yeah. So anyways, basically, Charles Dickens is the one who transformed Christmas to the modern celebration that we know today. And it has become one of the world's essential holidays. And I'm sorry that I took longer than you really wanted, but this did become a deep dive, and I did find the twists and turns. Let me conclude with a concluding remark. So while the path to righteousness as taught by Jesus may be straight and narrow, the path to the celebration of his birth was not. And whether one celebrates Christmas to honor the life of Jesus or just a break from the gloom of midwinter, Christmas today is one of the world's essential holidays. Thank you very much. The end.
Okay, why don't we move on?
I am so sorry I took so long.
Okay, Keith, thank you for that. Next, we're going to go to celebrations in Islam. And for that, we have Irshad Ali, who immigrated from Trinidad in the West Indies with his brothers to the United States at the age of 8. Being the eldest child, he helped his mother raise his 5 siblings after the death of his father at age 15. He holds an undergraduate degrees in computer information security and computer network systems from ITT Technical Institute of Oxnard, California. He is passionate about learning theology, social ethics, and history. Irshad has served as a board member of the Islamic Center of Ventura County for more than 10 years. He is also part of the Ventura County Interfaith community, aiming to foster mercy and compassion for all humanity. Currently, Earshot is a procurement specialist at MJP Technologies Incorporated, serving cutting-edge technology for K through 12 education and hospitals. Boy, what a time to be involved in that. He lives with his wife, Shanaz, and they both love to travel. Who doesn't? Earshot, take it away. Unmute yourself.
Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. That is the Arabic greeting for peace and blessings be upon you all. I'd like to thank you all for giving me your time. And so today we'll be discussing the Islamic holiday known as Eid al-Fitr. So the first question of my slide is, what exactly is the Islamic holiday Eid al-Fitr? Eid al-Fitr, also pronounced as Eid al-Fitr, depending on the transliteration. Eid in Arabic means feast, festival, or holiday, and Fitr literally means initial creation. Eid al-Fitr Eid has two Eids in Islam, and the second one is Eid al-Adha, and I'll only be focusing on Eid al-Fitr. Eid al-Fitr is the celebration of breaking the fast, which marks the end of the 9th month of the Islamic lunar calendar. And that month is called Ramadan. Millions of Muslims around the world observe Eid al-Fitr every year to acknowledge Allah, the Arabic word for God, of the revelation of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who Muslims believe him to be the last and final prophet. Next slide, please, Terry. One after that. And here I'm going to talk about the quick overview on the 5 pillars of Islam. The first is the Shahada. Basically, this is the Muslims' declaration of faith and believing in one and only in one God, and believing in a final messenger, which is Muslims believe Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. The second is Salah, which is the Arabic word for prayer. Muslims pray 5 times a day. The third is Zakat, which is charity. Muslims who can afford have to pay a certain taxed amount every year. And fourth is Hajj, where Muslims have to make pilgrimage from their locality to Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia. And the fifth is Som, which is fasting in the month of Ramadan. This is all these commitments, and this particular commitment where in this month there is no food or drink from sunrise to sunset. So basically daylight hours. And the reason why I brought this up is because right after this completes is when the celebration of Eid al-Fitr begins. Next slide, please. So the next question is, when is Eid al-Fitr? The exact date is never really certain. Most religious authorities, it varies in different countries. They rely on the sighting of the Eid crescent moon to announce when it officially begins. It can be delayed depending on if the sky is too bright, or when the moon to be out, or if clouds obstruct it. It must be seen by the naked eye. This is also the reason why Ramadan can start on different days in different parts of the world. The dates are not the same time every year, and the start date move 10 to 12 days each year as I mentioned, following the Islamic lunar calendar. Next slide, please. Why is Eid al-Fitr celebrated? So Muslims mark this time with a vibrant celebrations that are unique to their region and past through generations. It is a time to have family reunions, to be with friends, to show gratitude toward God following the previous month of reflection. The holiday serves as a great reminder for Muslims to be grateful for what they have and to share with those who may be less fortunate. Next slide, please. Eid prayers. So following the traditions of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, Muslims would prepare by taking a bath and wearing their best attire before the Eid prayer. Similarly, like wearing your Sunday's best as going to church. And this is known as Salat al-Eid. They would then head out to their local mosque while reciting a special morning communal prayer. The Salat al-Eid is performed only twice a year, and that's for the both Eids. The Imam leading the Imam who is the preacher, leading the congregation will usually explain how to perform this prayer before it begins. The prayer will start early in the morning at a set time, and while everyone awaits, they will chant repeatedly the greatness of Allah, which is the Arabic word for God. After the Imam leads the prayer, he will then give a khutbah, which is the Arabic word for sermon. Afterwards, everyone would congratulate and compliment each other. You will hear Muslims wishing each other Eid Mubarak, which is a greeting that refers to having a blessed day during Eid. And Muslims are also encouraged to forgive and seek forgiveness from one another. Next slide, please. How is Eid al-Fitr celebrated? Besides giving thanks, Muslims give an obligatory payment to charity known as Zakat al-Fitr, which is then distributed to the poor and less fortunate. Gifting is a big part of Eid celebrations. Children will receive money offerings, and family members will buy one another presents. Women would paint their hands and feet with intricate mehendi, also known as henna designs. Everyone will partake in sharing food and sweet dishes among loved ones, neighbors, colleagues, friends, and even strangers. Eid is a 3-day long celebration, and in many countries with large Muslim populations, Eid al-Fitr is a national holiday. In the US and the UK, Muslims may request to have the day off from work or school. And practices will vary from country to country. For example, in the UAE, there would be also huge events with fireworks shows. Egypt and Pakistan, Muslims would decorate their homes with lanterns, twinkling lights, or flowers. In Jordan, they have special markets where they would exchange gifts. I personally have not, I'm not from either of these countries, but in my country, my birth country of Trinidad, we would have special foods, treats, and desserts, and our homes are open, and our neighbors who could be of different faith, whether that's Roman Catholics, Hinduism, a non-faith, poor or rich, they will come to our homes, open door, and treat themselves to our food. And next slide, please. So I hope everyone had their dinner already. This is some desserts that are common throughout the world and also mostly in my birth country. To the left, we have something what is called gulab jamun. And this is the made of flour and sugar. To the middle of it is kurma, which is basically a tasty, crunchy stick. And it's made by the East Indian indentural laborers who arrived in Trinidad over 170 years ago. And it's a simple snack in many households. To the bottom left is what's known as aloo pie. And the word aloo is basically the Indian word for potato. And it's basically like a stuffed fried potato. And the upper right-hand corner, it's called barfi. And this was brought to Trinidad from the Indian subcontinents. It originated from the Persian word barf, which means snow. And it basically contains of milk, powder, solids, condensed milk, sugar, cardamom, ghee, and ginger, etc. And it's one of the most popular sweets in Trinidad, served in many restaurants. And to the bottom of that is what is called rasgulla. And this is also made of milk solids, deep fried, soaked in a syrup flavored cardamom, rosewater. But Trinidad refers to this as rasgulla, but the actual name is gulab jamun. So I'm not sure what happened in our birth country, but they probably tend to kind of mix names up. And it is also, it was introduced from other countries in Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. And it is used as a dessert in major celebrations such as marriages and Eid. Next slide, please. And the top left is dates is very important in the month of Ramadan, and basically the Muslim lifestyle of eating. It's a tradition of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and breaking their fast after not having a meal for such a long time. And to the right, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with samosas, which very popular, and they can be stuffed with chicken, beef, or even potato. And the dipping sauce is tamarind. And to the bottom left, these are all also pies. And they can be baked or fried, and also contains chicken and beef. In the middle of that, it's what's known as pilori, and it's another fried floury dish, and you can dip it in tamarind sauce or mango sauce, and they call it chutneys. And to the bottom right, we have something that's called sawine, and it's usually made of milk and vermicelli. And to cut things short, that will be my last slide. I have one more, which is a video. And Terry, if you could please show that. Thank you guys for your time.
While you're trying to get that up. Oh, here it comes.
في غمرة بهجتنا هنو يلا اللي تحبون، في حزتها الأعياد وش باقي غير الأعياد. في غمرة بهجتنا هنو يلا اللي تحبون، في حزتها الأعياد وش باقي غير الأعياد. والعيد شرف بالحب الله يحيي، ما دمنا مع بعضنا دامت مساعيد. والعيد شرف بالحب الله يحيي ما دمنا مع بعضنا دامت مساعي دامت مساعي فيه الفرحة معهودة افرح وانسى أحزانك فيه الضحكة معسولة داعبها بكل أشجانك فيه الفرحة معهودة افرح وانسى أحزانك فيه الضحكة معسولة علي ألحانك ردد كلمة منشودة عيد مبارك بالحانك خلي العيد بحلولة فرحة وسامر خلانك فرحة وسامر خلانك والعيد شرف بالحب الله يحيي ما دمنا مع بعضنا دامت مساعي والعيد شرف بالحب الله يحيي ما دمنا مع بعضنا دامت مساعي دامت مساعي والأحزان فيها الجو مكانه وقت الضيم والونات راحوا ولا زمانه ما للضيقة والأحزان فيها الجو مكانه وقت الضيم والونات راحوا ولا زمانه نبض الساعات والبسمات حانوا على النوانة فرحة عيد فيه تزيد وتتفاخر في كيانه وتتفاخر في كيانه
Wow, thank you so much, Irshad. That was beautiful. We're going to go next to the Baha'i faith. Arash Payan is a lifelong Baha'i living in his native Thousand Oaks with his wife and two beautiful daughters. He did his undergraduate and graduate studies at the University of Southern California. And I'm kind of a UCLA fan, but that's all right. He received degrees in computer engineering and computer science, respectively. He is the treasurer of the Thousand Oaks Baha'i community, and along with his wife, runs 2 virtues classes for children every Sunday morning in their home. Arash, take it away.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see everyone here. I typically start off talks when I'm giving talks that involve the Baha'i faith with a little intro to the Baha'i faith because, it's not a commonly known faith. And that's actually works really well for tonight because the story of the origins of the Baha'i faith tie closely to what this festival that I'm going to share with you tonight called Rezvan is all about. So let me throw that up on the screen there so we can all see what I'm talking about. Hopefully that's there for you. So tonight I'm going to talk about one of the holy days in the Baha'i faith called Rezvan. As you can see on your screen, it's spelled R-I-D-V-A-N, but pronounced Rezvan. And Rezvan is just an Arabic word for paradise. And the origins of it go something like this. In the 19th century, so we're talking about the 1800s, the Bab, which is the Arabic word for the gate, this is the title, announced his prophecy into the world and said, I'm here to prepare the world for the coming of he whom God shall make manifest. And the Babi faith was born in Persia, in ancient Persia. And during this time, the number of Babis in Persia flourished, and it really brought about a progressive movement in the country. And one of the spiritual moral leaders within the Babi movement was Baha'u'llah. And at this time, Baha'u'llah, after the Bab, who was the prophet founder of the Babi faith, was martyred, the followers of the Bab looked towards Baha'u'llah for guidance and moral leadership with the Bab's passing, after the Bab's passing. And so during those intervening years from before the establishment of this festival of Rezvan, and the Bab's passing, the notoriety, the I guess the fame and the affection of all the Babis grew for Baha'u'llah, and the clergy and the government ministers in Persia became wary and scared of this, thinking that such an individual could be a threat to their power, and so they moved to exile him from Persia to Baghdad. And that's what happened. He was sent to Baghdad in 1853, with government soldiers to escort him there. And in Baghdad, and the hope of this was too that by removing Baha'u'llah from Persia, that his message, that his faith, or that, at this time was not his faith, that his power would fade. Though Baha'u'llah did not seek any sort of power or political, had no sort of political goals, simply a message of love and caring for the poor. And so anyway, Baha'u'llah was exiled to Baghdad, and there for 10 years he remained. But much to the chagrin of the Persian government officials and the clergy, Baha'u'llah again continued spreading the message of the Bab and grew again in notoriety and the affections and love of all of his companions throughout the city. And so once again, at the behest of the Persian officials, they asked the Ottoman, the Persian officials asked the king of Persia to ask the Ottoman Empire, the leaders of there, to have Baha'u'llah exiled even further from the Persian borders, away from Baghdad, to somewhere further off. And they did so after 10 years of residency in Baghdad, and they exiled him to Constantinople, which is now known as Istanbul. So we all know that song, and we're all the origins about that. And so when they did that, though, this was for the companions of Baha'u'llah and his family and all the people in the city. This was a very sad time for them, for this great individual to be leaving them. And so on April 22nd, 1863, as he was about to prepare to leave for the city, he traveled across to the northern side of the Tigris River in Baghdad, to a place known at the time as the Najibiya Garden. This is again along the banks of the Tigris in Baghdad, and there on that first day, folks from all parts of the town, of all ages, young, old, rich, poor, educated, workmen, tradesmen, men, women, of course, came to bid their farewells to Baha'u'llah. And when they entered that garden, that back then known as Najibiya Garden, Baha'u'llah made an announcement, a proclamation announcing his prophethood and the establishment of the Baha'i faith, and that he was the one who the Bab said God shall make manifest, thereby establishing the Baha'i faith, and in that garden, which was then renamed the Garden of Rezvan. And that took a day of sadness and grief and turned it into a day of supreme felicity. And that is where the origin of this holy day of Rezvan came from. So Baha'u'llah remained in that garden for 12 days, where they set up a tent there, and this garden was bordered with beautiful rose bushes all around it. And every day the gardeners would cut some roses from the bushes, and they placed them in a big pile right in front, or right in the center of the garden near the tent. And they say the pile of roses was so high that the people who were sitting around to try and speak with each other, they couldn't even see the other side of the roses, that they were so piled up so high. And so it was on this first day that Baha'u'llah declared his faith, declared his religion to the world, his manifestation to the world. On the 9th day, the rest of the family of Baha'u'llah arrived at the garden, and then on the 12th day is when they actually set off for the 4-month, what was expected to be a 4-month journey through the heat of summer over to Constantinople, escorted by the soldiers. And that banishment was actually only one more of the remaining 3 left in Baha'u'llah's life, as the Persian Empire continued to exert influence upon the Ottoman Empire to banish him further and further away from the Persian borders, because every time they did it, they thought they would remove his ability to attract followers and teach. But as a result of continually exiling him, his message just spread further and further throughout the world. And so that's where the origin of Rezvan came. It was those that 12 days in that garden of Rezvan. And that day of supreme felicity is now celebrated by Baha'is around the world every year on April. The 1st day, the 9th day, and the 12th day are celebrated every year over this 12-day period known as the Festival of Rezvan. And there aren't any traditions or common foods or anything like that that Baha'is eat. It's mostly a time for Baha'is to come together and commemorate the establishment of their new faith, and a time for them to come together and celebrate in whatever way their culture typically sees fit. And that is it. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
That's such like you say, it's something that a lot of us aren't familiar with, the Baha'i faith. So Tim, do we have a quiz available for these people? Are you with me, Tim? The other Tim, first Tim. We had our speakers submit questions. So here's your quiz, and this will be graded. So take a moment and pick the answer that you think is right, and then try to remember back to Irshad's presentation on Islam, because after Rabbi Mike Lotker gets done with his presentation, we're going to have 2 more quizzes. But while you're doing that, I would like to introduce Rabbi Michael Lotker, and I've heard this introduction a number of times because he's one of our speakers that is just amazing, and really his presentations are amazing, as well as his career. I look at this and I am amazed. Rabbi Lotker is a 2nd career rabbi, having been ordained at 55. Apparently had a midlife crisis somewhere in there, and rather than getting a sports car, he went back to college, which we're very thankful for that. But he ordained at the age of 55 from the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in 2003. He is a physicist who spent his first career in alternative energy, focusing on wind, solar, and geothermal energy. He holds an undergraduate and graduate degrees in physics from Queens College in New York City and from the University of Illinois. Prior to his ordination from it's the College of the Reform Movement's Rabbinic Seminary in 2003, he received his Master of Hebrew Letters degree from the same institution. An entrepreneur, he started a number of alternative energy firms, including a wind power development company that installed and operated wind farms in Hawaii and California. He's widely published in the alternative energy field. He is presently Rabbi Emeritus at Temple Ner Amin, Camarillo, California, interim rabbi of Temple Beth Shalom of Bozeman, Montana, and the community rabbi for the Jewish Federation of Ventura County. He's a member of the Central Conference of American Rabbis and the Board of Rabbis of Southern California. His interest and participation in interfaith dialogue stimulated his rabbinic thesis entitled Ezer Kenegdo, toward a theology of Jewish-Christian partnership. He's a sought-after speaker at synagogues, churches, and campuses. And in June of 2014, he offered the opening prayer at the United States House of Representatives. And we are so lucky to have him with us tonight. Rabbi Michael.
Thank you very much, Tim. And you can see how effective my prayer was in the House of Representatives. So I hope you can see the presentation. Somebody give me a thumbs up if you can see it okay. Yes? Okay, thank you. So this is just a taste and an overview of Hanukkah. So this is making the rounds on Facebook. Imagine if your cell phone was at 10% but lasted 8 days. Now you understand Hanukkah. You will hopefully understand that introduction a little more before this short time is over. And let me just see. Okay. So one question is, how do you spell Hanukkah? This is always a big issue for Jews writing cards and so on. And so here's an analysis of how people spell Hanukkah. For the most part, people spell it with an H. You can spell it with a CH. As far as I'm concerned, you can spell it any way you want, because this is really the correct way to spell Hanukkah. Chet Nun Kaf Hey. As you will see, this term means dedication, and it refers to the dedication of the temple in Jerusalem. So I too have a short video, and I realize I didn't turn on my sound on the video. Oh, I did turn on the sound. Okay, good. Oops, here we go. So this is very short, but it's a very good introduction. Let me know if you can't hear the sound.
So let's just put it out there. Hanukkah is not the Jewish Christmas. Yeah, they're both holidays that occur in the wintertime, and sometimes even on the same day, one on December 25th and one on Kislev 25th. You know Kislev. They both bring more light into homes during a time of shortened daylight, and for a lot of people, they both involve present giving. What is Hanukkah then? If you're asking this question, then know that you're in great company, as it's the very same question the ancient rabbis asked each other when they developed the holiday. They discussed, is the essence of Hanukkah about a little bit of oil that lasted 8 days, or about a military victory of the few over the many, some combination of both? Though many Jewish holidays find their roots in the Torah, Hanukkah finds its source in the Book of Maccabees. And while it can appear to be all about playing dreidels and lighting the menorah, technically called the Chanukiah, it is also a miraculously meaningful 8 days for the Jewish people. You may remember the old story, something about finding a container of oil in the Second Temple in Jerusalem that burned for 8 days beyond its one-day capacity. Great! You've got one of the foundational Hanukkah stories down. The other story is about the Maccabees who risked their lives for religious freedom against a bullying government and a culture of assimilation, when the mainstream culture not only forced Jewish practice underground, but also literally destroyed the center of Jewish life, the temple. Judah, the Maccabee, along with his family, stood up against the opposition and ignited a revolution. Whichever foundational story resonates, it's about rising to the occasion. Sometimes oil outlasts itself, and sometimes people outdo themselves. While exchanging presents has become mainstream in Hanukkah celebrations, for many the rituals and how-tos of Hanukkah center around cultivating presents. The word Hanukkah means dedication. When the temple was nearly destroyed and Jewish life almost destroyed with it, a small group gathered in strong force to rededicate their temple. So Hanukkah is a time to ask, what do I want to rededicate myself to? A cause, a practice, a habit? If this sounds too serious, breathe easy. Remember, we're gathered around lighting the menorah, spinning dreidels, and eating latkes. Lighting a menorah may be the only Jewish thing that some do all year, and even that can be a heroic act, as it celebrates the freedom to be Jewish in a majority non-Jewish culture. You do it by gathering around and lighting one candle for each night, so that on the second night there are 2 candles, and on the third night 3, and you get it. You light them from new candle to old, from left to right, with a blessing, of course, as shown on screen. Its central purpose is to publicize the miracles of the holiday, the light that lasted beyond expectation, and the few who were up against the many. Plus, it identifies a Jewish home. The ritual of lighting is an invitation to bring more light into our lives and to emanate a nice, warm glow during the darkest time of year. And Hanukkah is not complete without a taste of some oily foods. Remember the oil story from like a minute ago? The most common are latkes in America, and in Israel, sufganiyot, or jelly donuts. Hanukkah, great for the soul, not so much for the diet. While you're enjoying these foods, you can chew on the story of the miracles, however you define them. Imagine that each person has a little container of oil, a personal pach shemen, containing energy for their well-being. You might feel like you have just barely enough to get through the day sometimes. What would it take then to be able to refill and refuel beyond what is expected? Chag Urim Sameach. Happy Holiday of Lights. Happy Hanukkah.
Okay, so roughly speaking, just to kind of go over and hopefully invite some questions, the basic story is a time when the Holy Land was occupied by foreign rulers, and Syrian Greeks who wanted to destroy Judaism. They fouled the temple horribly. In fact, the stories are that they sacrificed pigs, particularly offensive to the Jewish mind, in the temple. And it was so bad that some people believe that the Western Wall tunnels that some of you have seen were actually built to cleanse the temple from this horrible fouling. The word Hanukkah means dedication, and it refers to the rededication of the temple. Once it was cleansed, the Jews gathered to rededicate the temple and begin the sacrificial worship system. And I keep coming back to this idea that Hanukkah is not the Jewish Christmas, but there are connections. So one of the ideas that I love to share is the idea that without Hanukkah, there would be no Christmas. Namely, the Hanukkah revolt is about 167 years or so before the birth of Jesus. And so had that Hanukkah revolt failed, Judaism might well have died. And if Judaism had died in this period, it's unclear, to say the least, what the story of Jesus would have been like. But there's a payback from the Christian church to the Jews, and that is without the Christian church, we would know much less about Hanukkah, because the books describing the historical origins of Hanukkah are in the books of Maccabees, which are not in the Hebrew Bible at all. They are in the Apocrypha, in the Catholic Church and in the Orthodox Church. There was a reference, I just want to make sure okay, yeah, I skipped one. So they describe this idea of lighting candles, and we light candles in a menorah. So, I probably have a good half dozen menorahs. Here's a particularly beautiful one made of Jerusalem stone, and I really like this one because if you forget the blessings, there's a cheat sheet on the back to remind you of what the blessings are, and there's just some Hebrew for those of you who may not have had the experience of seeing Hebrew so much. You light one candle. You light the Shamas candle on the first day. This is kind of a guardian candle. And then you light one candle on the first night of Hanukkah, 2 candles on the second night, until all 8 nights of Hanukkah, corresponding to the 8 nights of miracles. Because again, the story goes that there was only oil sufficient for one night, but they lit the menorah anyway. And the miracle is that the oil lasted for 8 days. We eat foods, as the video mentioned, that are heavy in oil. And the miracle is that your cholesterol level never goes up no matter how much greasy food you eat during Hanukkah. I should say this is not true, but it's fun to think about. There's a game called dreidel. And the idea goes back during times when Jews were forbidden from observing holidays. The kids would try and observe the holidays in secret. So there's a spinning top called a dreidel with letters on it, which stand for a great miracle happened there, Nes Gadol Hayasham. And this actually is an Israeli dreidel with the phrase Nes Gadol Hayapo, a great miracle happened here. Some of these can be actually quite beautiful and clever in their design. One of the interesting things about this, and Keith referenced the same idea in connection with Christmas, Hanukkah takes place at the darkest time of the year. And there are holidays, Christianity, other holidays that also have festivals of light during the darkest time of the year. It's quite literal in connection with Hanukkah, because Hanukkah also is placed during a lunar calendar. So it takes place actually 4 days before the new moon and 4 days after the new moon. There is some ideas that there is a Halley's Comet connection, that we know Halley's Comet and its periodicity, and it seems pretty clear from science that Halley's Comet was bright during this time when when the temple was being rededicated. This is a poignant reminder that sometimes it takes quite a bit of courage to put a Chanukiah in the window and declare you're Jewish. And there have been episodes of anti-Semitism, notably in Montana, when people put Chanukiot in their window. So it's always a discussion among Jews about celebrating, do you celebrate Christmas? Do you celebrate Hanukkah? I'm a big fan that you should celebrate your holidays. I know, as Keith said, that Christmas has become commercialized and in many ways gotten away from the religious traditions. I'm a big fan of bringing it back to religious traditions. But even though Hanukkah is actually not a very sacred holiday in Judaism, it's the only common holiday that is not in the Bible, there are deeper meanings which I think are important to remember for Hanukkah, and some were referenced in the video. One is you have enough. The miracle of Hanukkah talks about oil that was only good for 1 day, lasting for 8 days. So they had enough oil. You have enough. With God's help, with the support of friends and family, you have enough time, you have enough patience, you have enough resources to do the things that God wants you to do and that you know you should be doing. Another major point for Hanukkah is what was impure can be made pure. Notice that there were 2 temples, Solomon's temple and the second temple. And there were no doubt dedication ceremonies, but we've lost track of those. Well, the only dedication of the temple that we celebrate is the rededication of the idea that when the temple was horribly, horribly made foul and then cleansed, that is what's worth celebrating. And for me, the lesson, the deep spiritual lesson of Hanukkah in this way is there are times in which our life gets fouled. It gets fouled through circumstances. It gets fouled through disease. It gets fouled through addictions. It gets fouled in many, many ways. But what we celebrate at Hanukkah is the recovery, is the making pure what was fouled. I always point out, I tell people, repeat it for me, Hanukkah is not the Jewish Christmas. But another thing I love to ask, and this maybe I should have put this as one of the questions for Tim, is people ask, what was the miracle on the first night? Because remember, they relit the eternal light called the Ner Tamid, and they lit it on the first night. And when they lit it on the first night, it burned, but there was no great miracle there. By the way, here is an example, one of my most precious objects, of a 2,000-year-old. Oh, it's glued, so it doesn't come up. Okay. This actually not 2,000, but 3,000-year-old oil lamp and an oil vessel that I bought on a trip in Israel from a reputable antique dealer. So this actually comes from the time of the first temple, Solomon's temple. So this would have been the similar kind of lamp that people would have been lighting in those days. So the question is, they lit the lamp on the first night, no miracle, right? There should be 7 nights of miracles. So the question is, what was the miracle on the first night? And people, the more mathematically inclined say the miracle on the first night is that only 1/8 of the oil burned each night. The answer I really like best is that the miracle on the first night was that people had the courage to proceed, that even though they knew they didn't have enough, they went ahead anyway, because they were so anxious to again celebrate the beauty of Jewish tradition. Lots of images of food. Someone once said the common issue of common statement you can make about every Jewish holiday is they tried to kill us, they didn't, let's eat. So you have this custom of coins. These are chocolate coins, and it goes back to a tradition of encouraging. The word Hanukkah comes from the same Hebrew root as the word for education. So it's a tradition of supporting schools and educators. And then, of course, the Chanukiah, the 9 branch menorahs, 8 nights of Hanukkah, and the Shamash potato latkes. It is not true that I named myself after potato latkes. And that's an Ashkenazi tradition, Eastern European, and in Israel, sufganiyot, the jelly donuts. And if there's time later, I can sing you one of my silly songs about Hanukkah, but I don't want to take up any more time than that. And thank you for your patience. Back to you, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Michael. Do we have more questions? Do we have a quiz or two, Tim or Terry? Okay, 2 questions. You have 10 seconds. Da-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee.
When I wrote up the first one, I had all of the above or none of the above.
Okay, I got that one. Yeah, you covered the second one pretty good too there. Okay, how about the Islamic quiz? And then if you haven't already and you have questions that you'd like to pose to any of our speakers, if you would use your the message, right? Is that the yeah,
The chat.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Oh, I need help. Use the chat to write down your questions for the speakers. And right now, I'd like to open it up to our presenters. If you have questions for each other, please feel free.
So I had a question about Eid and the Muslim holiday. Does that come at the beginning or the end of Ramadan? It wasn't clear to me whether this breaking the fast is something that happens every day, or there's a special holiday at the beginning of Ramadan or at the end of Ramadan.
So the Eid comes at the end of Ramadan, and it's the beginning of another month.
Thank you.
Here, I have a question. Each night when you break the fast, it's kind of almost a mini celebration, isn't it? What do you call that?
Oh, we call it an iftar. It's basically another word for dinner or breaking the fast, and you just have you break your fast with dates, and then you go and pray, and afterwards, and you have some dinner.
Huh?
Yeah, you say it like that, but I've been to a few, luckily, at the Islamic Center, and oh my goodness, it's a feast.
It is a feast, yes. So I have a question for, where'd you go, Arash? For Arash, because you mentioned the flowers and olive flowers involved with the bahula. So are flowers not involved in the celebrations?
Oh, I mean, definitely there could be. Actually, that's a optimal segue that I can use to show you. I had some pictures of different celebrations from around the world, and one of them actually even has flowers, some roses actually. So it's up to what the hard traditions are not there. It's not like there's a Rezvan tree or any sort of particular thing. So like here's the celebrations in Colorado and Spain, Salvador, Brazil, New Zealand. So some friends in London. This is the same one in Spain. And here it is right here in Thousand Oaks, California. And actually, they were handing out roses to, actually, those are my girls there. They wanted to hand out roses to everyone who's attending. So,
oh, cool.
So the rose, so there was a lot of beautiful stuff that happened that day. Actually, if you look in this previous one in Spain, you see they put up a tent there to make it look like they were in the rose garden. So there are no there is no set way of celebrating it. It's up to every community, every family, everybody to decide on how they do it themselves. It's just a time. And of course, people take a day off of work and from work or school, whatever the case may be.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Thank you. I had wondered that. So I'm going to ask, we went through those polls pretty quickly, and I don't know if anybody else was interested in, we saw the polls, but we didn't get the answers. So honey, can you put up the first poll for one of them? And we might want to view I don't know if people had questions about the polls. He's working on it. I don't think he's ignoring me. There we
There
go.
he is. They got it. Okay.
So over how many days is the festival of Rizvan? Is that how you say it, Rosh? Yeah.
Rezvan, yeah.
Rizvan. So people said 12 days. What was the answer? 12 days.
Very good.
So there's a lot of food involved in that too, right?
There can be. I mean, every holiday I've ever been to has lots of food, so.
True, very true.
That could just be around here, though.
So which calendar does the Islamic religion follow? Rashad, are we right? Is it the lunar calendar? Did he disappear?
He's
He's there. He's muted.
You're
Rashad?
muted, Rashad. But it is the lunar calendar. And another question was, are the lunar or the Islamic calendar and the Jewish calendar, are they similar, or because they're both lunar calendars?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is the Jewish calendar, Hebrew calendar, is a lunar solar calendar, and the reason it's a lunar calendar, which, as Ishad alluded to, the idea that if you follow a lunar calendar and you have 12 months, every 12 months you are 11 days short approximately of a solar year.
Mm-hmm.
So every holiday in Islam comes 11 days earlier each year on the Gregorian calendar. So Ramadan wanders through the year. In the Hebrew Bible, we have a setup with a lunar calendar, but we are told that Passover, which is on a particular date, the 14th day of Nisan, occurs in the spring. So the rabbis had to do something to keep Nisan in the spring. And what they did was add leap months. And they add a leap month 7 times in a 19-year cycle. So if those of you that keep track of when Hanukkah occurs, it will be really early some years. It's pretty early. It's coming up very quickly, early in December this year. It's actually occasionally in November, and some years it will actually occur in December. And I think in a few thousand years, it may even occur in January. And we'll actually have one year where there will be no Hanukkah at all. And no Hanukkah in December.
Wow.
So it can vary because in the Hebrew calendar, it is both lunar and solar with leap months.
Thank you.
You see, I don't have any more questions on my screen. Terry, did you get any more, or Tim?
I didn't. Was that the last of the polling? I do have one question that came really quite a while ago, and I hope I get this right. How does the Roman Saturnella tie in, Keith? Do you can remember what that
Roman
was?
Saturnella?
The celebration of the god Saturn.
No, that didn't come up at all. The only thing that came up in my studies was Sol Invictus, which was the Roman sun god. Now that may be referring to Saturn, but Sun and Jupiter, I think, were equated to each other. But while we're on that, let me go ahead and say something. Sorry, my talk went so long, but the history of Christmas I found so fascinating as I delved into it. I had trouble finding what to cut out. In the 1600s, a Protestant German writer claimed that the Christians used the holiday of Sol Invictus to cover over it, which was a paganization of the holiday, which debased the church. However, there are records as early as 300 AD that shows that Emperor Arius took Sol Invictus, which had no holiday, and created a holiday on December 25th to capitalize on a date that already had great importance to the Christians at that time. So I don't know if that enters into the Saturn thing, but the only thing that I came up with was the sun god and how that related to the early Christian church.
Okay, hey, before we go, I think we have one more polling question. Tim?
Yes. Thank you,
Right.
Keith.
Can you put that up, Tim?
Oh, yeah. Ah,
Okay, and this isn't, we won't grade you on this one, okay? So everyone gets an A+ for this. We just want it for our own benefit if we're really, doing something that might be meaningful. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, and that gives us a good idea as to whether or not we'll do this again next month.
well, actually, speaking of that, next month, we are in January. It will be the last Thursday in January. Tim Helton, the notable guy there who's putting up these polls, is a Jain scholar, and he will be teaching us on the introduction of Jainism. So if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to go to I'm going to try this again. Go to the website, and I know what I did wrong before. And you will see, this is what our website looks like. Can you take down the polling, honey?
I did.
Yeah.
Not sure what's going on.
Mhm.
Okay.
There you
So this is what this website looks like. If you go here and you're interested, you can subscribe to our email list here. And then over here, you'll see the different things that have been recent posts. And the last one we did last month was by the home worship by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And you can go here and see that on Facebook. And if you punch this up, you would see that it would come up and you would see the last, oh my gosh, we're not sharing that. So I just wanted to give you a walkthrough. And
Shameless self-promotion.
I wasn't meaning to do that. So think about it. Jainism is fascinating. You've heard him speak a little bit about it here and there, but there's some things that
Real
take
quickly,
into your life. What?
real quickly, Jainism was very influential on Gandhi, and because of its influence on Gandhi, on Martin Luther King Jr. So something to look forward to in January.
Yes.
And speaking of Gandhi, I think Hinduism also has a major holiday of light at this
Yes,
time.
Diwali. Yes. And they celebrated recently, and they did it on Zoom locally. They did Zoom meetings. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your attending, and I hope you did enjoy.